Hey Optimancers, Chris here. Today I want to talk about the Blood Hunter. The Blood Hunter is a homebrew class created by Mercer, and he had released it a while back, but he has recently revised it. In February of 2020, he released a revised version of the Blood Hunter, and it is available on the Dungeon Masters Guild. It's a pay what you want, so pay what you want. It is also available on D&D Beyond for free. Now, the reason I want to talk about the Blood Hunter, there's two main reasons. The first reason is, I think, certainly when we look at this new version of the Blood Hunter, I think it is a well-designed class. I think it is well-balanced within the other classes of Dungeons & Dragons. And second reason I want to talk about it is because when I've seen YouTube videos on it, they talk a little bit about the thematics of it, but they don't talk about the mechanics of it. This is usually the case. And what I like to do is I like to look at the mechanics and see how we could make a Blood Hunter be effective. So that is the purpose of today's video, is we are going to look at the Blood Hunter, see what I think it's good at, what I think it's not good at, which of the abilities I think have opportunity for us to make really effective, and make a character that does well in combat. Now I should mention that the Blood Hunter is a martial class. There is a certain magical feel to them. They undergo an arcane rite to become a Blood Hunter, and many of their abilities are magical in nature, but in general they're not spellcasters. There is a subclass of Blood Hunter that will get some limited spellcasting ability, but the base class in itself does not cast spells at all. So when we look at it, we should be comparing it to things like fighters and barbarians. So let's take a look at the Blood Hunter. Let's get started. So the first thing we should talk about with the Blood Hunter is the thematics. So the idea of a Blood Hunter is a fighter type of character who's undergone a special rite that has turned them into a Blood Hunter. And it basically uses blood magic in order to enhance its own abilities. Often this involves doing damage to themselves in order to enhance their martial capability. But let's get right into the mechanics of this class. So the first thing, hit points. We're looking at D10 hit points per level. So this is equivalent to what we would get with a fighter or a ranger or a paladin. So a reasonable amount of hit points, not the most in the game, but considering we're often doing damage to ourselves, we should consider these hit points to be lesser than a fighter or a ranger. So we're going to need to worry a little bit about our defense. Second thing we should note is that they get saving throws for dexterity and intelligence. That means there is no proficiency for constitution or wisdom saving throws. So those are two important saving throws that we're not getting a bonus on, and that is also something we should be thinking about. With armor, we're getting light armor, medium armor, and shields. So we are not getting heavy armor with a Blood Hunter. So if you want a Blood Hunter that is a strength-based Blood Hunter, so a Blood Hunter that is going to be using, for example, two-handed weapons, we might want to consider a multi-class here in order to get that heavy armor, because medium armor is going to require a dexterity score of at least 14 in order to get the maximum benefit from it. Well, if we went to heavy armor, we wouldn't have that restriction. However, if we are playing a Blood Hunter that is an archery character, that's not going to be a problem. As we look at the main class chart, we're going to see our level and proficiency bonus as normal. We're also going to see a Hemocraft die. So this die will add to some of the damage we do. It's also something that we will occasionally take in terms of damage in order to enhance our own abilities. And as we can see, it begins at a D4, and it will advance by level and eventually get to a D10. If that Hemocraft die table looks familiar, it is identical to the martial arts die that a monk will get. Then we will get Blood Curses known. And Blood Curses are kind of a magical ability that we're going to get, where we will get one minor effect, usually a short duration effect, that we can do once per rest. As we increase in levels, we will be able to do these more than once per rest, up to a maximum of 4 times per rest. And then we get our features, and there are quite a number of them, as there usually are with non-spellcasting characters. When we look at our skills, note that we're going to begin with 3 skill proficiencies, so that is a little bit higher than average, the same as you would get with, say, a ranger. With our starting equipment, just one thing I would note is we can get a hand crossbow here. And I would consider a hand crossbow to be one of the primary possibilities for making an effective blood hunter. So at first level, we're going to get two abilities, Hunter's Bane and Blood Maledict. Now, Hunter's Bane basically is going to give you advantage on wisdom checks to track, the evil creatures, fey, fiends, and undead. It also gives you advantage on intelligence checks to recall information about them. So it's kind of similar to a ranger's favorite enemy, except a little more versatile. It also sets our save DC for our Blood Hunter abilities. We're going to be using 8 plus our proficiency bonus plus our intelligence modifier. So this is going to be a class that we're going to not want to dump our intelligence with. We're going to want to have a decent intelligence. The recommendation in the beginning of this class is that you make strength or dexterity your primary score, and then intelligence your secondary score. The second ability we're going to get is the Blood Maledict. We're going to get one curse that we're going to choose. Eventually we will have 5 curses, but to begin with, we get one curse we can choose. We can change it when we go up in levels, and there are a number of choices to pick from, detailed at the end of the class, but we're going to go through them right away. Now, the curse you can use once per rest. As we go up in level, at level 6, you can use it twice per rest. 13th, you can use it 3 times. And at 17th level, you can use it 4 times per rest. Note that this is a short or long rest, so we can use this every time we take a short rest. So let's go through the blood curses right now, and I'm just going to give you my quick take on them. As I said, you pick one right at first level, but we're going to get more as we go up in level. And the way they work is each of them has a base effect and then an amplified effect. But if we want to do the amplified effect, then we are going to damage ourselves equal to our Hemocraft die. So we have the Blood Curse of the Anxious. What this does is it allows you to intimidate somebody more effectively. And then if we amplify it, we can give them disadvantage on a wisdom saving throw. The base effect of that I consider pretty circumstantial. The amplified effect could be pretty effective, but we have to amplify the effect to get that. The second one is the Blood Curse of Binding. When we do this, we reduce a creature's speed to 0 if they fail a strength saving throw. The limit is, creature can't be more than one size bigger than you, so this would be better on a medium-sized blood hunter rather than a small-sized blood hunter. Though if we amplify it, it can last more than one turn, and we don't have to worry about size category. So this is a bonus action, and frankly, in combat, I'd consider this to be a pretty effective thing. So if you have a creature that is going to have a pretty nasty melee attack, you could use your bonus action, reduce it to speed 0, and then it's not going to be able to close, and you're going to be able to deal with other creatures, ranged attacks, etc. So a pretty good one, I think. The next one is the Blood Curse of Bloated Agony. And what this does is it gives a creature disadvantage on strength and dexterity ability checks for 1 round. And they take 1d8 necrotic damage if it takes more than 1 melee or ranged attack during its turn, so a little bit of a damage as an add-on. Now note that with strength and dexterity being affected, we can then give them disadvantage on every single way they could resist a grapple. So if we had a grappling character, something like Blood Curse of Bloated Agony could be pretty effective as a way to ensure that they can get their grapple. Or if you had, say, a Shield Master character that shoves enemies prone, we could use this to give them disadvantage on that. And if we amplify it, it lasts for a full minute. They get a saving throw, which is Constitution, every round to end the curse. So this is pretty niche. I think you would need to combine this with another character that does grapples or another character that does shove attacks. On its own, I think you would find it pretty circumstantial. But if we have a partnership with another party member, we could make this effective. The next one is the Blood Curse of Corrosion. Note, this is a prerequisite of 15th level and Order of the Mutant. And what it does is basically you use your bonus action, 30-foot range. This is pretty standard. And the creature makes a Constitution saving throw or is poisoned. And then it gets another saving throw at the end of each of its turns. And those are Constitution saving throws. And if they succeed, it ends. And if we amplify it, we're going to add a damage rider. It's going to take 46 necrotic damage, and every time it fails a saving throw, another 46. So this is pretty effective. Poison condition, of course, is pretty debilitating. Of course, a lot of creatures are immune to poison as well. So this is something that wouldn't be a bad thing to have in addition to other curses, but you would have to pick and choose the creatures that it's going to work against. The next one is the Blood Curse of the Exorcist. This again is a 15th level prerequisite and only for Order of the Ghost Slayer. Bonus action, 30-foot range as usual, and a creature that is charmed, frightened, or possessed, it will end the effect. That's really good. I would love to have that on a character because somebody's going to fail a wisdom saving throw, and being able to just instantly remove that is going to be very helpful. And if we do the amplify effect on that, the creature that caused the charmed, frightened, or possessed condition will take a little bit of damage and have to make a saving throw, or they're stunned for a round. Going back into blood curses that any blood hunter can take, the next one we get is Blood Curse of Exposure. Now this one I think is a pretty good one for a blood hunter to take. Number one, it's not using up our bonus action. It's going to use a reaction instead, so we can do it as a rider to our regular attacks without having to give up our bonus action, which will often be another attack. And what it's going to do is it is going to remove the resistance of a certain damage type from the creature. Now, as a blood hunter, we are going to be adding damage to our weapon strikes, which is going to be a certain damage type that a lot of creatures might have resistance against. So we could use this to remove that resistance and get full damage from our weapons. And with the Amplify, we can even do damage to creatures that are normally immune to that damage type, though they still get resistance. This is also something that we might combine with another character. So let's say you have a Tempest Cleric, they want to do some thunder damage, so you might use this to remove resistance to thunder damage, for example. The next curse is the Blood Curse of the Eyeless, again 30-foot range. And this is a reaction effect, so you use your reaction when a creature makes an attack roll, and then you can subtract your Hemocraft die from the creature's attack roll. If you amplify it, it will affect all their attack rolls until the end of the turn. As usual, this goes into play after the roll is made, before it's determined if it's a hit or a miss. I should also note this could be used on attacks against yourself. It can also be used on attacks against allies. So defensively, I think this is a pretty good ability. The next one we have is the Blood Curse of the Fallen Puppet. And what it does is when you drop a creature, you use your reaction and that creature will make a final attack against a creature of your choice within range. So you take down the enemy bandit and then maybe they attack their bandit ally right before they go down. If we amplify it, we can actually have them move so they could attack somebody who normally wouldn't be in range, and you will add your intelligence modifier to their attack roll. So a pretty neat ability. In terms of power, I think it really depends on what you're fighting. I think it might be okay, but it's got to be set up just right. Another creature has to be in range, all these things. So I think it's an okay ability, but I wouldn't jump on it. Then we get Blood Curse of the Howl. This is an 18th level prerequisite and only the Order of the Lichen. It's an action, and every creature you can see within 30 feet of you must make a wisdom saving throw or they're frightened of you. And just a one round effect. And you can exclude creatures that you want, so you don't have to hit your allies with it. If you amplify it, you increase it to a 60-foot range. So a good ability, but it comes on really late. And at 18th level, I wouldn't say this is all that fantastic. Then we get the Blood Curse of the Marked. This is a bonus action, 30-foot range, and what it does is, until the end of your turn, whenever you deal right damage to the target, this is the extra damage that you're going to be doing with your weapon, you deal an additional die of damage. I don't think this is good at all, because if we're giving up our bonus action, with most builds we're going to have some method of using our bonus action effectively, quite often even for another attack. And if we're removing a full attack to add another Hemocraft die to damage, that's not a good trade-off. Definitely not worth expending one of our Maledicts for. And if we amplify it, the next attack roll we make against the target has advantage again. We're probably giving up an attack to do this. I'm not sure I'm seeing a benefit here that weighs enough to make that worthwhile. Then we have Blood Curse of the Muddled Mind. This is a kind of an anti-mage one. What happens is the creature has disadvantage on the next Constitution saving throw it makes to maintain concentration till the end of our next turn. If we amplify it, it's all Constitution saving throws. So if we're making several attacks, they might have to make several saves with disadvantage. Hopefully, they would fail the first concentration saving throw. So then the amplified effect isn't going to really do anything. So I would only be using the amplify effect if it's really, really important that they lose concentration. Because odds are pretty good they're going to fail that first save if they're making it with disadvantage. And then the final one is the Blood Curse of the Soul Eater. Again, prerequisite of 18th level, and this is the Order of the Profane Soul. And what it does is when a creature that isn't a construct or an undead is reduced to 0 hit points, you can use your reaction to grant yourself weapon attacks with advantage. And if we amplify it, we regain one of our spell slots that the Order of the Profane Soul get. So those are all the blood curses. Overall, I'd say they're very moderate. This takes up a lot of room and a lot of decisions, but the effects of these are decent, but not overwhelming. But as a first level ability, there are some decent things here. But as far as I'm concerned, if I'm taking Blood Hunter at all, I'm taking 2 levels, because second level is where I think the Blood Hunter really comes online. First thing we're going to get is a fighting style, and we can choose archery, dueling, great weapon fighting, or 2-weapon fighting. So lots of options there. So with our fighting style, I'll say that when I look at the Blood Hunter, I think they are most effective as an archer. So archery would probably be, for most builds I make, the selection I would make. But there are ways to make a pretty effective melee Blood Hunter as well, and we'll go through those later, and in those cases then I'd be more inclined to do something like dueling or great weapon fighting. But this next one, Crimson Rite, I think is the premier ability of the Blood Hunter. If I'm going to play a Blood Hunter, this is the prime reason why I'm considering it. This is a really nice ability. So at second level, what we can do is it's a bonus action and we activate it on a weapon. And as long as we're holding onto that weapon, this will last until our next short or long rest. So the duration here is fantastic. And what it's going to do is it's going to add a die of damage to that weapon's damage dice. And at second level, we have to choose between fire, cold, or lightning damage. Now, lightning is probably mechanically your best bet here, because you're going to find you face resistance and immunity less than you do with cold or fire damage. And what's going to happen is that extra damage die is going to increase with our level as our Hemocraft die increases. So at 5th level, 11th level, 17th level, that die increases to a d6, d8, and then to a d10. When we get to 14th level, we can get a better damage type. So we can choose Necrotic, Psychic, or Thunder. All of those are pretty reliable damage types. Psychic is probably the most reliable damage type you can get. What's special about Crimson Rite is, if we look at the other classes, if we look at the ways that they can increase weapon damage, Crimson Rite is kind of unique, because generally speaking, we're going to be either concentrating or using our bonus action in combat, or both, to increase our weapon damage dice. But with Crimson Rite, we can use our bonus action right after we finish our rest, so no actions in combat, and there is no concentration. So this is something that isn't going to be broken by you taking damage. And because it's not using concentration, and because it's not using up our bonus actions in combat, this is something we could also combine with other methods to increase our weapon's damage. So if we wanted to do something like a Hunter's Mark, for example, Crimson Rite can be done in addition to that without interfering with it at all. So what we can do then is we can stack different damages. So if we take, say, Order of the Profane Soul, we might take the Hex spell. So we could do the Hex spell, and it would add on to the damage that we do with our Crimson Rite. So we would do the base weapon damage type. Then we do an additional die equal to our Hemocraft die. Then we do an additional d6. So we would be rolling damage 3 times with every attack. And what this means is, if we want to make an effective Blood Hunter, we really want to concentrate on making as many attacks as possible. What this does is it means that, number one, feats like Crossbow Expert and Polar Master are really good because they're going to give you that bonus action attack. And that extra attack every round means an extra die of damage from Crimson Rite and potentially another die of damage from something else. It also means that multiclassing things like 2 levels of Fighter for something like Action Surge, for example, can also be really effective. So this is a really good ability, and definitely a reason why I would consider playing a Blood Hunter. At 3rd level, you're going to get your Blood Hunter Order, that's your subclass. And there's 4 to choose from, and they're all reasonably different, and we'll go over them in detail a little later. We get our ability score improvements at the normal levels. At 5th level, we're going to get extra attack, and this is going to be lovely for us because our Crimson Right damage has scaled at the same time, so it's now doing D6 damage, and we're getting the extra attack. So we're basically getting an additional 2d6 damage in a round of combat. And if we've gotten a bonus action attack through something like Crossbow Expert, 3d6 additional damage. And what I would say is, if you are considering multi-classing a Blood Hunter, 5th level is a level I would definitely consider as a jump point. So if I was going to take Blood Hunter, but I wasn't planning to take it right to 20th level, or I wasn't planning to take it as a straight class, I would consider multi-classing at 5th level. At 6th level, we're going to get an ability called Brand of Castigation, and what this does is it is available once per rest, so either a short or long rest. And when you hit a creature and you do your Crimson Right damage, which you're going to be doing all the time, then you can choose to brand that creature. And what happens is every time that branded creature deals damage to us or to an ally within 5 feet of us, it's going to take psychic damage equal to our intelligence modifier. Now, how effective this is really depends on how high our intelligence is. If we did something like a 12 intelligence, this isn't very good. But if we have figured out a way to make intelligence our primary stat, and I'll talk about that in a bit, then we could find that this would be doing 3, 4, or even 5 points of damage. Potentially even 6 points of damage, and we'll get into that later as well. And remember, this isn't just doing 3 points of damage. This is 3 points of damage every time that creature does damage to us or an ally within 5 feet. So if we're taking on a creature that does 2 or 3 attacks a round, it could be taking this damage 2-3 times a round, as well as maybe damage from things like opportunity attacks as well. So this isn't an overwhelming ability, especially since it's only usable once per rest, but against the right target, it could be really effective. If we are fighting one big, tough enemy, that's when you want to use Brand of Castigation, because that damage is just going to kind of whittle away at them. And that 3 points of damage becomes 6 points of damage, becomes 30 points of damage as the combat continues. 9th level gives us what I consider to be the weirdest ability you get, which is Grim Psychometry, and it's kind of vague what this does. It says when you make an intelligence history check to recall information about a darker past surrounding an object you are touching or a location you're present in, you have advantage on the roll. Now, I wish I had a nickel for every time I make an intelligence history check to recall information about a darker past of an object I'm holding. It just doesn't happen normally. So as an entire ability, this seems really weird. Now, your DM is going to be the one to determine when you make intelligence history checks to recall information about a place or an object. Maybe they'll work in the darker past into whatever intelligence history check you make. So this is something that could come up reasonably often if the DM plays along. But as it's written, it's just so circumstantial, you may never use it. So it is the most vague ability that a Blood Hunter gets, and I think the most disappointing ability a Blood Hunter gets. But one level later, we get a fantastic ability, and that's Dark Augmentation, and at 10th level, what happens is we get a speed boost of 5 feet, which is nice, but also whenever we make a Strength, Dexterity, or Constitution saving throw, you get a bonus to your saving throw equal to your intelligence modifier. So if we're taking our Blood Hunter into these higher levels, I really think we need to look at how we can get our intelligence higher, because we're really getting a lot of benefit here. We don't have proficiency in Constitution saving throws. Getting your intelligence modifier as a bonus is a big deal. At 13th level, the psychic damage from our Brand of Castigation feature increases to twice your intelligence modifier. This could be a lot of damage. If we've got a Blood Hunter that has gotten a 20 intelligence, for example, that's 5 points of damage, doubled becomes 10 points of damage every time that creature does damage to you or to somebody next to you. It also hurts their maneuverability now. They can't take the dash action. Not that creatures are taking the dash action a lot, but they can't do it now at all. But also any attempt to teleport is going to do damage to them, and they have to make a wisdom saving throw, and if they fail, the teleport fails. That's pretty big. At 14th level, we're going to get Hardened Soul. This gives us advantage on saving throws against being charmed and frightened. This is pretty important because Blood Blood Hunter is focusing primarily on strength or dexterity and intelligence. That means they don't have a lot to spare for wisdom. So our wisdom score is probably going to be maybe a 10, a 12 if we're lucky. So we're looking at a saving throw for wisdom of nothing, right? 0 or a +1. And we're not proficient in wisdom saving throws. And when we're making saving throws against being charmed or frightened, those are almost always going to be wisdom saving throws. So getting advantage on that is actually pretty important. But I wouldn't think that that advantage is necessarily going to be enough. It may help us, but wisdom saving throws are going to be a weak spot for a blood hunter. It might even be something you might want to consider getting the resilient feat to shore up. And finally, at 20th level, we're getting our capstone Sanguine Mastery, which is okay. I don't think it's fantastic for a capstone, but basically when we do our blood right damage, we can roll twice and then we can choose which one to use. So we're going to be doing more damage with our Crimson Right, and then when we do a critical hit, we're basically going to get one of our blood curses back. So that's the base Blood Hunter. Let's go a little bit through the subclasses. The first one is the Order of the Ghost Slayer. So as you would imagine, these are kind of specialized on dealing with undead. And the first thing that you get is at 3rd level, your Crimson Right damage becomes radiant damage. This is a big upgrade because fire, cold, and lightning, these are resisted or even facing immunity reasonably often. And Crimson Right is the premier ability of a Blood Hunter. Switching it to Radiant is a huge boost because Radiant damage is very, very seldom resisted. So this is going to give us much more reliable weapon damage. Also, if we are fighting undead, we are going to do an additional die of right damage when we hit them. So that's basically double the damage from your Crimson Right. That's basically like getting a smite on every single attack you make against undead. So once again, what that tells us is we want to get as many attacks as we can. Also at 3rd level, what we're going to get is we get an additional use of our Blood Curse. That's okay. And in addition, our Blood Curses work against creatures that don't have blood, because normally it is restricted, as you would thematically think, to creatures that have blood. Now, your DM is going to have to determine whether something like a zombie, for example, has blood. I mean, they certainly don't have circulating blood, so there's a bit of a vague thing there, and your DM's just going to have to make a call. But if you take the Order of the Ghost Slayer, that is no longer an issue. At 7th level, we're going to get an Ethereal Step. Now, be careful, just to note, this isn't true etherealness, because you can be attacked and you can attack. This is only affecting your movement. But it should be noted that you can do this. It's not going to use an action or a bonus action or a reaction or anything. You can just do it. So it is a free action to use, and you can use it to go through, say, enemy squares, or through a wall, or through a locked door. So a fair number of utility uses here, potentially some tactical uses, but just keep in mind you're not truly ethereal. You can be attacked, you can make attacks. And you can do this 1 turn for every short rest you make. When you get to 15th level, you can do it twice. At 11th level, what we get is our Brand of Castigation. Remember, that's the one we do at 6th level. When we hit a creature with an attack, we can do it once per rest. Well, now when we afflict a creature with that, we do now an extra die of damage with our Crimson Right. So just think about this for a second. If we're playing a Ghost Slayer, so let's say we're taking on a really powerful undead, maybe something like a Lich or maybe a Dracolich, and then we hit it with our Brand of Castigation. Now, because that creature is undead, and because of the Brand of Sundering, we're actually getting 3 additional damage dice with our weapon. And at 11th level, we're looking at D8s. So that's an additional 3d8 every time we hit an undead creature that we've used our Brand of Castigation on. That is a ton of damage if we're doing lots of attacks. Once again, the whole thing about a Blood Hunter is you want to add as many attacks as you can get. In addition, when you use your Brand of Sundering, the creature can't move through creatures or objects. So this is more for if we're fighting something that's incorporeal. So then at 15th level, we get that Blood Curse of the Exorcist that we talked about when we talked about Blood Curses. So this is the point where we get it. And then finally, at 18th level, we get Right Revival. And this is basically like Half-Orc's Relentless Endurance as an 18th level ability. and it ends our Crimson Right. So as an 18th level power, I think it's a little bit underwhelming, but overall, the Ghost Slayer has some nice stuff earlier on. We're getting much more reliable Crimson Right damage, and we can potentially do 2, even 3 dice of damage when we do our attacks. Obviously, this is something that is much better against undead. If I'm playing in something like a Ravenloft campaign, this is going to be a lot more attractive than if I'm playing in a campaign where maybe we're going to the Nine Hells or something. Then we get to the Order of the Profane Soul. So the idea of the Order of the Profane Soul is that our Blood Hunter has made a pact, and we're going to choose the same patrons that a Warlock could choose from. So you get the Great Old One, the Archfey, the Fiend, or you can choose the Hexblade or the Undying or the Celestial. But we make this pact. It's going to give us a little bit of Warlock magic and some other abilities as well. So if we look at our spell chart right at 3rd level, what we're going to get is 2 cantrips known, 2 spells known with 1 spell slot, and that spell slot is cast as a 1st level spell. This works very similar to the Warlock spell casting in that we have our spell slots and they're automatically cast at the highest level available. So when we get to 20th level, we'll be able to cast 2 spells at 4th level, but we also get them back every short rest, just like a Warlock would. Now, unlike a Warlock, the Order of the Profane Soul will be using Intelligence as their casting stat. Also, unlike a Warlock, we will not get the expanded spell casting based on the pact we make. So, for example, if you were to choose the Great Old One, you wouldn't be using the expanded spells available to Great Old One Warlocks. They're not available to a Profane Soul. You only can take Warlock spells. Now, I have to say, if I'm going to be taking Order of the Profane Soul, and at 3rd level I'm going to get 1 spell slot, I'm probably taking Hex, because Hex is going to stack with our Crimson Right, allowing us to do 2 additional dice of damage every time we hit a creature with a weapon attack. Hex damage is necrotic damage. Necrotic damage is reasonably reliable, so that is a nice bonus for us. Now, it will require a concentration, but we're not concentrating on anything as a Blood Hunter, so this is kind of an obvious choice. And because we get back our spell slot with every short rest, generally I'd be casting Hex when I begin combats, and then I would recast it each time I take a short rest. So that's kind of all I would do with it. You would technically have another spell known, so maybe something utility or circumstantial, but most of the time I'd be looking at Hex. Also at 3rd level, based on the pact we chose, we're going to get 2 things. Number 1, our weapon is now going to be considered a spellcasting focus for casting Warlock spells. So this may help us if we're using something like a weapon and a shield, but not necessarily. Having your weapon as a spellcasting focus does not mean you can do a somatic component unless the spell also has a material component. So that's just something to think about, but it's not something that we're not going to be able to work around. Again, if we're casting Hex, Hex does have a material component. That means we can use our spellcasting focus of our weapon to cast it. So this isn't going to be a big issue. Just as a note, just note that holding a spellcasting focus alone does not mean you can complete the somatic components of every spell. And then, based on what pact we chose, we're going to get some additional benefit to our weapon. With the Archfey, it glows with a faint light, can't get half cover, 3/4 cover, or get the benefit of being invisible. All pretty circumstantial stuff. With the Fiend, when we do Hemocraft die, we can re-roll a 1 or a 2. Then we have the Great Old One. When we score a critical hit using our weapon, that creature is frightened of you until the end of your next turn. There's no saving throw on this. That's amazing. And I'm going to come back to this because I think this is the premier one. Then we get the Undying. When we reduce a hostile creature to 0 hit points, we regain a number of hit points equal to 1 roll of our Hemocraft die. That's not bad. Then the Celestial, you expend 1 use of your Blood Maledict feature as a bonus action to heal 1 creature that you can see within 60 feet of you. And they regain hit points equal to 1 roll of our Hemocraft damage die plus our intelligence modifier. That's basically like a healing word, and it uses one of our blood curses. I don't think that's all that great a deal. And then the Hexblade. Whenever you target a creature with a blood curse, your next attack, so just 1 attack against a cursed creature, deals additional damage equal to your proficiency modifier. So 1 damage bonus on 1 attack. And you will be able to do that once per blood curse you can do, so never more than 4 times. So the Hexblade one, I think, is pretty eh. The Celestial one, I think, is pretty eh. The Archfey, I think, is pretty circumstantial. Fiend and Undying are both decent, but the Great Old one is really good. And if we were going to make a character that worked around this, I'd be looking at ways to improve my chance of getting a critical. So if we were to multiclass with Hexblade, for example, then we could use Hexblade Curse to increase our critical range, or ways we can get advantage with our attack rolls so that we have a better chance of getting that critical hit. But a Frightened condition with no saving throw really makes it worthwhile to build our character around better chances of getting a critical hit. Then we get Mystic Frenzy at 7th level. When we use our action to cast a cantrip, we can immediately make one weapon attack as a bonus action. Now, as a straight class Blood Hunter, I don't think this is very good. We could have Eldritch Blast. Potentially, we could attack multiple times with the Eldritch Blast. Certainly at 7th level, we'd be attacking at least twice with it. And then we would get a weapon attack as a bonus action. But then again, we can attack twice with our weapon and make an additional weapon attack as a bonus action if we have something like Crossbow Expert or Polar Master, and we're going to be adding our Crimson Right damage to all those damages. Well, with Eldritch Blast, we're not adding anything unless maybe we have a Hex spell up, then maybe 1d6 added. So that's likely going to be less damage than if we had just attacked with a weapon. Now, if we wanted to make this more effective, I think it would require that you multi-class with Warlock. Then, once you can get some invocations, things like Agonizing Blast, Repelling Blast, then we can do more effective things with our Eldritch Blast, and it might then be worthwhile to combine with a weapon attack. Also at 7th level, we're going to get Revealed Arcana. This is basically going to give us a spell that we can cast based on the patron we selected. And there's some okay spells here. Archfey gets Blur. I could certainly see the advantage of having Blur, especially if you're not concentrating on anything else. The Fiend gets Scorching Ray. That is not something that I'd be using with a Blood Hunter. Probably going to do less damage than if you would just use weapon attacks. Great Old One gets Detect Thoughts. Detect Thoughts can be circumstantially useful. It's not something I'd use a lot, but it can be nice to have. With the Undying, you get Blindness, Deafness. Again, you got to use your action for this. That means you're not making weapon attacks. You're a Blood Hunter. Weapon attacks are what you're good at. I don't think that's that good. Then with the Celestial, you get Lesser Restoration. Now, that's something, again, I think could be handy because sometimes in combat you really need a Lesser Restoration. And then the Hexblade, you get Branding Smite once. Branding Smite is not a good spell. I don't think this is a good ability at all. So with the Revealed Arcana, there's nothing here I think is fantastic. There's a couple here I think are circumstantially useful. But overall, I don't think this is a huge ability. Then at 11th level, we get Brand of the Sapping Scar. So once we reach 11th level, when we use our Brand of Castigation against somebody, that creature now has disadvantage on any saving throws against our Warlock spells. On a full caster, that would be insanely good. On a tiny bit of a caster, as we are, it's not going to be that great. I mean, we're basically limited to 2nd level spells at this point, and for a number of levels after that, so maybe on something like a whole person spell, this could be effective, but that in itself is a circumstantial spell because it's only usable against humanoids. So overall, this is okay, but it sounds better than it is, and because it requires 11 levels, this isn't something that we're going to be able to make use of through a multi-class and some other class to be far more effective, unless we're talking about maybe a 20th level build or something. And then at 15th level, we're going to get an additional spell that we can use once per long rest. And these spells are 3rd level spells. We're 15th level, so they're not a big deal, as you can imagine. You get Slow, Fireball, Haste, Bestow Curse, Revivify, and Blink. Fireball, for example, at 15th level, you don't want to use your action to cast a Fireball because the damage is so low for that level. And then finally at 18th level, we're going to get Blood Curse of the Soul Eater, which is the blood curse that we talked about near the beginning of the video. So Order of the Profane Soul, I think the main reason why I would consider it is to get the Hex spell without requiring multiclassing. Because if we don't have to multiclass, then we're going to get our ability score increases at their maximum rate. We're not going to slow down our progression of our Crimson Right dice, things like that. So the reason I would take it is because we want to increase the damage on our weapon attacks. We can do so with a hex spell, and we don't have to multiclass to do it. But most of their spellcasting stuff is pretty weak. This is not a premier spellcasting subclass. This is kind of like your Eldritch Knight or your Arcane Trickster, where you're just kind of dabbling in a little bit of spellcasting. But weapon strikes are still going to be your best option almost all of the time. The next subclass is Order of the Mutant. So what the Order of the Mutant is they use mutagens that they drink and they alter themselves. And that's going to give them a certain advantage and a disadvantage. And in some cases, that disadvantage is really bad. We'll talk about that. So right when we take this subclass, we're going to get the ability to create mutagens. We learn 4 different mutagens right at 3rd level, and then we get another one at 7th, 11th, 15th, and 18th level. So we're going to have a ton of options here. And we can also switch them out as we gain level. So the number of options here is actually quite big. Now, the way it works is we create a mutagen whenever we finish a short or long rest. And then we can take that mutagen, and it's going to last until we take a short or long rest, which means we can basically have a mutagen active all the time. At 7th level, we're going to be able to create 2 mutagens, and at 15th level, we're going to create 3 mutagens, and we are not limited to 1 mutagen at a time. So we could take all 3 mutagens at the same time and get the benefits of all 3. So generally what I would do is I'd create the maximum amount of mutagens available every time I take a rest, and then I would consume them right after I finish that rest. Unless the mutagen is circumstantial, in which case I would hold on to it until I need it. At 7th level, we're going to get immunity to poison damage and the poison condition. That's fantastic to have. That's a great ability. In addition, what you can do is when you have a mutagen, you can use your bonus action to ignore the side effect of the mutagen for 1 minute. That is also really big because, again, the downsides of some of these mutagens is debilitating. So being able to use your bonus action to suppress that negative effect is a big deal. But you can only do that once per long rest. So if we are using mutagens that have absolutely debilitating downsides, strange metabolism will certainly help, but I don't think it is a complete way around that. Then at 11th level, we get the Brand of Axiom. So when we use our Brand of Castigation, basically it's going to prevent creatures from turning invisible. It's going to prevent them from polymorphing or changing shape. So it kind of forces them into their original shape. Pretty circumstantial. I think against the right foe, really effective. But only against certain foes. Then at 15th level, we're going to get the Blood Curse of Corrosion. That's one of the blood curses we talked about at the beginning of this video. And then at 18th level, we're going to get Exalted Mutation. And this one's kind of cool. What it does is, so you've taken a certain mutagen, and then you have a need for a different mutagen. What you can do is, as a bonus action, you can just switch the mutagen type, so you get the benefits of the new mutagen, and you get rid of the side effects of the old mutagen. And you can do this a number of times equal to your intelligence modifier every long rest. So this is something we could do multiple times. Pretty good ability for a capstone, one of the better ones for the Blood Hunter subclasses. So we're going to go through the mutagens here, and I'm going to give you just my overall feeling on whether I think they're overly effective. Now, remember, we get a ton of mutagens here, so I wouldn't be too worried about taking a couple that are circumstantial. The first one gives you a flying speed for 1 hour, requires 11th level. That's great, right? And then we get disadvantage on strength and dexterity ability checks for 1 hour. That's not a huge downside, so at 11th level, Aether, I'm taking. Concentration free flight in 5th edition is very good. The next one is Alluring, gives you advantage on charisma ability checks, disadvantage on initiative rolls. So when I'm dungeon crawling, I'm not using Alluring, but I might have it as a mutagen I might do when maybe we're in town doing lots of charisma checks and initiative isn't coming up very often. Now the next one sounds really appealing. It's Celerity. It increases your dexterity score by 3 and your dexterity maximum by 3. So you could have up to a 23 dexterity. And it scales with level, so it becomes a +4 at 11th level and a +5 at 18th level, which means eventually we could even have a 25 dexterity. If we're playing an archery character, that's going to improve our damage on every attack. It's also going to improve our chance to hit with every attack. But the downside here is bad. You gain disadvantage on wisdom saving throws. And we talked about wisdom saving throws already. As a blood hunter, this is a weakness. So we're taking something that's already a weakness, and then we're going to make it into a massive weakness. That's the kind of Achilles heel I don't want to have on my character, because you're going to be facing a wisdom effect once in a while, and if you have celerity, you're basically going to fail automatically. And wisdom saving throws are the kind of saves that are going to take you out of the combat. They can even pitch you against your allies. I just think that the cost here is too much. I would be very hesitant to use a celerity mutagen. Then conversant, we get advantage on intelligence ability checks. That's pretty circumstantial. Disadvantage on wisdom ability checks. That's not too bad. So that's an okay circumstantial formula, not one I'd be using all the time. Cruelty is an 11th level one. When you use the attack action, you can make an additional weapon attack as a bonus action. Now, if I'm making a blood hunter, chances are good I've already figured out a way to get a bonus action attack, probably through Crossbow Expert or Polearm Master. So, although this would be effective, if I happen to have a character that didn't have that already, by 11th level, I almost certainly will. Then Deftness, advantage on dexterity ability checks, disadvantage on wisdom ability checks, again, circumstantially useful. Then Embers, resistance to fire damage, a vulnerability to cold damage. These kind of things, unless I know exactly what I'm going up against, I wouldn't use them. I don't want vulnerability to cold damage. But if we're going to be fighting a red dragon, then maybe I would use it. So it's one of those things that it's okay to have these kind of things, but I wouldn't be using them normally. And we get the same thing, resistance to cold damage with the vulnerability to fire damage, resistance to piercing damage, but vulnerability to slashing damage. Overall, these are not going to be the kind of mutagens I'm going to gravitate to. The next one is kind of interesting. Mobile is an interesting one to me. You're immune to the grappled and restrained conditions. At 11th level, you're also immune to the paralyzed condition. As a side effect, you gain disadvantage on strength ability checks. Now, one of the things you might be doing a strength ability check for is resisting a grapple, but you would have immunity, so you wouldn't need to make those checks. So you might be making less strength checks. And being immune to grappled and restrained. Restrained can happen quite a bit, and it's pretty bad. And then paralyzation, of course, is absolutely debilitating. So mobile, I think, is a pretty good defensive mutagen. The next one is Night Eye, and you get dark vision 60 feet, or if you already have dark vision, you add 60 feet, but you get the sunlight sensitivity. So this is something that I'd only be doing if we're like exploring the Underdark or something like that, and I knew that sunlight wasn't going to be a problem. Then advantage on wisdom ability checks with a disadvantage on charisma ability checks. Again, might be circumstantially useful. I could see doing that if I'm tracking an enemy or something. Get advantage on those survival checks and then advantage on perception checks to see them. And I'm not going to be making charisma ability checks in that situation. Now, potency sounds a lot like celerity. In this case, we're increasing our strength score by 3, and then it can scale as well to eventually increase our strength score by up to 5. Again, it increases our maximum. And as a side effect, you have disadvantage on dexterity saving throws. I would say that the disadvantage to dexterity saving throws, although dexterity saves can come up reasonably often, isn't nearly as painful as the disadvantage on wisdom saving throws. So if I was going to make a strength-based blood hunter that's maybe using two-handed weapons, maybe I've multi-classed into fighter, I'm wearing heavy armor, potency is something I might consider. I mean, that disadvantage on dexterity saving throws hurts, but it's not the end of the world. And that +3 to strength is a pretty nice bonus. So potency for the right kind of build is something I'd consider. Precision gives your weapon attacks a critical hit on a 19 or 20. Keep in mind that critical hits are going to increase your blood right damage as well. And as a side effect, you get disadvantage on strength saving throws. Strength saving throws just don't happen that often. This one is a good choice. And we get rapidity, where we increase our speed by 10 feet. At 15th level, it increases by 15 feet. And we get disadvantage on intelligence ability checks. Intelligence ability checks are pretty rare unless we are making a knowledge-based character. So this one could be really good for a character that wants to be quite mobile. The next one is Reconstruction. It's a 7th level minimum ability, and what it does is for 1 hour at the start of each of your turns. Now this is important. 1 hour means not necessarily until your next short rest. So this has a shorter duration than the other mutagens do. You regain hit points equal to your proficiency bonus if you have at least 1 hit point, but no more than half your hit points left on your turn. And as a side effect, your speed decreases by 10 feet for 1 hour. So the downside here could be quite bad. It really depends. If we have something like a mount or something, then maybe that's not a big deal. But if we're a landlocked character, we don't have any other bonuses to our movement, that 10 feet might be pretty bad. The other thing is, the window here is reasonably small. You have to have at least 1 hit point. You can't have more than half your hit points. Most rounds of combat, that's not going to be the case. So I wouldn't count on this being healing every round. Quite often, once you've hit that half hit point mark, getting down to that 0 hit point mark doesn't take very long. So this ability may not come up a lot. It's probably not something I'd take. We have Sagacity. Now this one increases our intelligence score by 3 and potentially up to a +5. So it sounds a little bit like Celerity. It sounds a little bit like Potency. But get this, as a side effect, you get disadvantage on Charisma saving throws. Charisma saving throws are rare. Way less common than Dexterity saving throws and Wisdom saving throws. So this one could be really effective. And if you want this one to be really effective, I'd be looking at multi-classing to the Artificer and taking 3 levels and getting Battlesmith. Because if we get Battlesmith, then we can use our intelligence modifier for attack and damage rolls with our weapons. So if we did that, and then we got Sagacity, that would just work together fantastically. Because we'd be getting the advantage on our weapon attacks and our weapon damage rolls. We'd also be getting advantage on our DC for our abilities. The damage for a Rite of Castigation would go up. And the downside here is relatively minor. So for the right build, this could be amazing. Then resistance to slashing damage, vulnerability to bludgeoning damage, not something I'd normally take. Resistance to bludgeoning damage, vulnerability to piercing damage, not something I'd normally take. And an additional use of our Blood Maledict feature. That might be okay, but generally one more use I don't think is huge. And you get disadvantage on death saving throws. I don't want disadvantage on death saving throws, so I just probably wouldn't take that one. So there are a few here that are kind of standouts. I think the biggest standout for me is Sagacity if we were to make the right build with it. Like if we were to take 5 levels of Blood Hunter and then switch into Artificer, take 3 levels of Artificer, get the use of our intelligence modifier for our weapon attack and damage rolls, and then get that bonus from Sagacity. And note that the scaling on Sagacity isn't based on our level of Blood Hunter, it's just based on our character level, so it's not even slowed down by us multi-classing for a few levels. Then we get our final subclass. This is the Order of the Lycan. And the idea here is that the Blood Hunter has actually undergone a rite of lycanthropy. So they have kind of a controlled lycanthropy that they can use to enhance their abilities in certain ways. First thing, 3rd level, we're going to get advantage on wisdom perception checks that rely on hearing or smell. Generally, perception checks don't rely on smell, but lots rely on hearing. Obviously, perception checks that rely on sight are probably the most common. And at 3rd level, we gain the ability to take a hybrid form, and it lasts for 1 hour. Note that you can speak, you can use your equipment, you can wear your armor in this form. So this is something that I would just do. And you're automatically going to get 4 features. The first one is Feral Might. You get a +1 bonus to melee damage rolls, and that scales with our level up to +3, and advantage on strength checks and strength saving throws. So right away, the Order of the Lycan is probably going to be something we want to do with a melee Blood Hunter. This is not something I'm going to choose for an archery Blood Hunter. Number 2, we're going to get resistance to bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing damage from non-magical attacks not made with silver weapons. And while we're not wearing heavy armor, we get a +1 bonus to our AC. That is pretty huge. That's going to be very similar to what a barbarian gets with rage, except for the potential of being hit with magical attacks or silver attacks. Generally, the attacks you're hit with aren't silver unless somebody's specifically going after you. So that is going to be a lot of resistance. And a +1 bonus to your AC is something I'm always going to want if I'm playing a melee character. Then we get predatory strikes, and what happens is that our unarmed strikes are something we could apply our Crimson Right feature to, and when you use the attack action, you can make an unarmed strike as a bonus action. So this would be another way to get that bonus action attack without having to take Crossbow Expert or Polearm Master. And then you get the downside to the hybrid form, which is bloodlust. So if you begin your turn with no more than half your maximum hit points, you have to make a DC 8 wisdom saving throw. Not a hard saving throw, but remember, we're not proficient in wisdom saving throws. Or move directly towards the nearest creature and use your attack action against that creature. That could be really bad for your allies. You choose whether or not to use your extra attack feature for this frenzied attack. So obviously you're not going to do that if you're attacking your allies. And then if there's more than one possible target, you roll randomly to determine the target. Then you regain control for the remainder of your turn. Of course, at this point you've already used up your action to attack, so there's probably not a whole lot more you can do on your turn. And if you're under an effect that prevents you from concentrating, like the Barbarian's Rage feature, you automatically fail the saving throw. That's going to be really circumstantial. Essentially, you would need to be multi-class with something like Barbarian in order for that to occur. At 7th level, speed increases by 10 feet, and we can increase our long jump distance and our high jump distance. Also, at 7th level, we're going to get the improved predatory strikes. We get a +1 bonus to attack rolls made with our unarmed strikes. The bonus increases by 1 at 11th level and 18th level. That's basically going to match the magic weapons we would expect a character to have at those levels, though notice it doesn't give a bonus to damage. Also, while you have the Crimson Right while in hybrid form, unarmed strikes are considered magical for the purposes of overcoming resistance and immunity to non-magical attacks and damage. At 11th level, we can use the hybrid feature twice, and we regain all expended uses when we finish a short or long rest. And we get a regeneration feature. And it's again one of those ones where you have to have at least 1 hit point, but no more than half your hit points. So it's relatively circumstantial. 15th level, Brand of the Voracious. We are going to get advantage on wisdom saving throws, specifically to maintain control of our bloodlust in hybrid form. So that's not a straight out wisdom saving throw bonus. And when we use our Brand of Castigation on a creature, we get advantage on attack rolls against them, that's quite good. Then at 18th level, we can use our hybrid transformation feature an unlimited number of times, and our hybrid form lasts indefinitely. So we can basically be in hybrid form as much as we want. We also get Curse of the Howl, the blood curse we talked about early in the video. Now, I think Order of the Lichen is pretty neat, but I also think there's a problem with it. And the problem is that hybrid form. If we're going to use our hybrid form to get those unarmed strikes, and we're going to kind of base our character around making those unarmed strikes so we can make our additional attack with a bonus action without requiring a feat, then we have to consider the fact that the hybrid form lasts for 1 hour. Now, fairly often what will happen is you'll adventure for an hour, and then you're going to take a short rest, and then you get a short rest, and then you get your ability back again. But that's not always the case. Sometimes there's longer than an hour. Sometimes there's much longer than an hour between rests. And you could end up in a situation where you don't have your hybrid form. And you're kind of counting on that if that's kind of what you're basing your character around. And the point where you give up your hybrid form, which tends to be the point closer to the point you're going to take a rest, tends to be the times when you're going to face the really tough opponents, when you're having the really tough combats. And you're not going to have your primary feature. So that's my issue with the Order of the Lichen. I think it's a neat class, but not being able to use your hybrid form till your next short rest, just like the Blood Hunter can do with Crimson Right, for example, is a problem. Do I want to do Crimson Right on my unarmed strikes when I might lose those unarmed strikes before I get my next rest? That is a problem. So Order of the Lichen, I think from an optimizer standpoint, is one I would probably stay away from. So when we look at multiclassing, the requirement is you're going to need to have a strength or dexterity of at least 13. That probably isn't going to be a big deal. And an intelligence of at least 13. And you're going to want that for your abilities anyway. So when we look at multiclassing, keep in mind that when we look at multiclassing that is going to require wisdom or charisma, we're going to find that there's a lot of our ability scores that are getting tied up in our mental ability scores, which means less in our physical ability scores. That's not always great for a martial character. But 2 levels of fighter in order to get action surge, I think is a great investment. I do it either at 1st level in order to get the heavy armor if I'm making a melee character that's going to be using strength. If I have an archery character that's probably using a hand crossbow, then I'd probably wait until level 5. Then I would grab 2 levels of fighter to get that action surge. That is going to stack with our extra attack feature. The other class that I think looks really good mixed here is the artificer, specifically to get 3 levels of artificer and get that battlesmith feature that allows us to use intelligence as our primary ability score. So suddenly we don't need a great strength or dexterity anymore. Probably want a 14 dexterity if we're using medium armor, but we can then really focus on our intelligence, get our intelligence up to 20. If we are from the Order of the Mutant, even up to a 25. And that's not only going to improve our DC, it's not only going to improve our rate of castigation, but it is also going to improve every single weapon attack we make. Again, I would think about taking 5 levels of Blood Hunter and then go into Artificer, get those 3 levels of Artificer. So that is the Blood Hunter. What do you think of this class? Let me know in the comments down below. Otherwise, until next week, I'm going to sit back, relax, and have some fun. D&D is for everyone. Thanks, everyone, and I'll talk to you next week.